Good morning. Today is January the 23rd, the year of our Lord 2023. That's what AD stands for, by the way.
Anno Dominus et Patris et Filii.
Is that Italian or Latin, or is it both?
Both with the extra F.
Today, Pastor Eugene, we have a lot of things to discuss. We're going to be talking about two big headlines that have been in our news cycle. The first one being the security breach. Bum, bum, bum. Do you think we have a sound bite for that?
Yeah.
Bum, bum, bum.
Bum, bum, bum.
That's, yeah, that sounds like a Star Wars song or something. Anyhoozle, we'll be talking about the confidential documents that were found. Bum, bum, bum.
Corvette.
Do bum,
everyone's-
bum, bum again.
Bum,
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 bum. Everyone always brings up that Corvette, but yeah, we won't be talking about the Corvette, but it was next to a Corvette. We'll be talking about that security breach and also our participation trophies Christian. We'll look into schools in Virginia that are arguing against merit-based awards. All of that and a little bit more this morning on the Dear Church podcast. Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Sam Yang.
I am Junsuk CO.
I am Junsuk Theo.
Oh, I thought you were going to say his name. How dare you?
What do you mean? I said my name.
Also, I think it needs to be pointed out that as Junsuk So, not because I realize we only say Seo. So anyone that's listening would always just assume that that's his last name, but it's actually Junsuk. How do you pronounce it, Junsuk?
So,
Dang, there you
So
go.
you
That's
were
that
wrong too.
native pronunciation. That's Junsuk So. And and Pastor Eugene and myself back again this week on the Dear Church podcast. Last week we had a recording with Brian and Reverend Timothy Brindle, which I really enjoyed. I thought it was great. What did you think, Pastor Eugene?
I really wanted to thank Brian 4 times for his interview.
Oh yeah, I heard
Not
he's
just 3.
I heard he's
just-
a very thankful guy when he's interviewing. I hope he'd interview me one day. And great. Last week was great. I loved it. I thought the content was amazing, especially the family worship portion was especially amazing for me because I wouldn't even be able to begin to start thinking about how to lead family worship with 8 children. So that was very nice.
You begin with 1.
Well, no, I know that, but I'm just saying like how you even begin to do family worship with. Oh, you're saying begin with 1. Today, Pastor Eugene and Junsuk, so I wanted to talk about 2 headlines that are in our news cycle. I know we've been kind of teasing this current events episode for 2 weeks now, so I wanted to get to, what we are hearing, what we are reading, and see them through a biblical lens. I think as we go into this episode, though, it's important for us to understand the purpose of why we even talk about current events, right? And I love how Pastor Harry Reeder's podcast, which is called Today in Perspective, puts it. Their goal is to apply a biblical worldview with gospel solutions to put the issues of today in perspective. That's how they say it, right?
Sam's saying this because he wants to take over that guy's job. The guy
No.
who says it.
No,
He wants
Steal
to
the
be the next
catchphrase.
guy.
no,
Yeah.
he wants to put the issues of today in perspective. That's what he says. But that's what we want, right? We want to discuss these topics as Christians to not only equip ourselves with information, but also with wisdom to view current events, past events, future events through the worldview of a Christian, which is the correct, holy, and God-honoring worldview. So let's start with the confidential government documents found in Joe Biden's possession. I want to just quickly summarize this situation, this controversy for us, for some of us that may not be aware. But on November 2nd of 2022, last year, confidential documents were found at Joe Biden's University of Pennsylvania think tank. First of all, what is a think tank? I try to look it up, but like a place where you think. What's a think tank, Pastor Eugene? Could you just explain what a think tank is for us? What's a think tank?
We tried to look it up and what to say.
gave me long articles and I wasn't in the mood.
Think tank is where you put together a research team.
Uh-huh.
The end.
So it's a building where researchers think.
I mean, depends on what purpose it has. Yeah.
It's like a lab.
No, it could be that's scientific. That's for science. It could be a policy institute for political people. A think tank. A group comes together and comes up with policies and then reads them out to you and be like, oh, I like that. I don't like that.
Okay. So it's a place where thinkers gather to...
It's like a tank where you think.
If you will. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I hope that explained it.
Yes. So documents were found at this little thinking place. Joe Biden's University of Pennsylvania thinking tank.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, so the documents were found on November 2nd, these confidential documents. And this information was released to the public in 2023, way after the November 2nd date, which a lot of people are saying was strategic as to not influence the midterm elections that happened right after that date. Ooh, conspiracy. Or is it? I mean, this might just be fact. But then following this news in mid-January of 2023, more classified documents were found in President Biden's garage at his home in Delaware. And then some more in a room adjacent to the garage. I don't know if that room was perhaps a laundry room. Who knows? But neither a garage or a room adjacent to a garage seem to be the place for classified documents. They're classified for a reason, but that's just the issue. These are classified U.S. documents that should not be in his personal possession. Granted, while he was vice president, he could have access to them. He cannot keep them for himself. And here we have to note that that's when the documents were taken during his tenure as vice president. He's offered explanations, saying that it was his lawyers that were helping him move out of his office. They were in a rush. I don't know why they were in a rush. They were given a 4-year warning. It was their second term to move out. So I don't know where the rush was, but he's saying that, you know, the lawyers were helping him move stuff and that they had moved the documents here. And as if it was not bad enough that the security breach happened, this announcement came after the whole controversy with former President Trump also holding documents in his home in Florida. And Mar-a-Lago. I wish my house had a name. It doesn't. It's just
Cambridge Terrace.
Oh my goodness.
Ooh.
I gotta bleep that out. People are gonna come after me.
Apartment.
No, please. I have a child now, please. I think what is just worse is that regarding Trump, Biden had pointed to him being irresponsible and incompetent. And I mean, I'm sugarcoating it, right? Because the words that he had for Trump were a bit more aggressive. He had said these things about Trump for holding on to these classified documents, whether intentional or an accident. And he had prided himself on his competence in national security measures. Then, bum, 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 lo and behold, this happens.
Bum, bum, bum.
That becomes a jingle. It can't come back down. It's like bum, bum, bum. You know, some may argue, well, Biden had less documents and he's being at least more cooperative than Trump. But the fact is, confidential documents were found in a place where they should not be found. We had a previous episode regarding Trump and that controversy, and we had said that this is not unusual. Many former presidents actually hold on to classified information. Perhaps it's a little memorabilia, let's just say, of their time in office.
It doesn't make it bum, bum, bum.
No, but I mean, it doesn't make it not wrong, but it happens. It wouldn't be the first time. So I guess the question is, why in this particular situation with President Joe Biden, why is this such a big deal? Why is it such a big deal that confidential documents are being leaked? That sounds like a very leading question, but why is it a big deal? Why should we care about this as Christians? Should we even care?
Should we care? Yes. Should we care a lot? Maybe. The end. Bum, bum, bum.
Yeah. Thank you.
Next question.
I have a couple more,
in the podcast. I mean, you said a lot. There's a lot to consider, I suppose. You can think about it politically. As Christians, we've always wanted leaders who would advocate for what is good, what is right. And that's why in the base level of what we desire, because people can change their minds. I mean, like Ronald Reagan changed his mind about abortion stuff during his tenure. And so he was for it, then he became against it as he, continued to progress in his political career. And so people do change their minds. And so what people really wanted to get down to is this person of a somewhat stable character that we know we could trust, that is predictable, that is unpredictable, or I guess that's what Christians might ask. Some people might even ask, is this person likable? Is this person influential? Because even if they're smart, if no one likes them or is not influential enough, then there's an ineffective president.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of considerations to take. John Piper and Wayne Grudem went back and forth about the character of Trump and things like that.
Yeah.
And so there are some considerations why this in particular is a big deal. And I'm going to kind of give away my position a little bit.
Oh, sneak peek.
Because we are supposed to be made to think it is a big deal. So whatever goes in the news cycle is what gets circulated over and over and over again. And then emotions are injected, and then we're supposed to feel emotional. Obviously, this one, conservatives are more likely to jump on top of this, but because it's the news cycle over and over again, now even like liberals up to the leftists have to talk about it because it's continually being circulated.
Yep.
And if something is continually being circulated, then it's on, a topic of discussion.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
When we start to compare, how come, Trump was raided for his one set of classified documents and Biden was not, and then some people like, oh, Biden went through the proper, protocols.
It's cooperative
in disclosing that he had these things.
Mm-hmm.
But then, even that doesn't make sense where he's had it for many, many years. The archives, apparently, they didn't know. National Archives didn't know. The DOJ didn't know at all. And who has lawyers clean out offices? And so all these questions come up.
Right.
I think what's more interesting is people predicting about why this is happening. People have gone back down to, let's say, Nixon. As a millennial, which you are, if I asked you if you like Nixon or not, how would you answer? Probably in the negative. Nixon isn't viewed as a very positive or a good politician.
When I think about his face, I just think about whatever gate. What is that gate?
Watergate.
Watergate.
And so people always refer back to Watergate. This is the next Watergate when it's a politician they don't like. This is untrue. Historically speaking, Nixon was one of the most popular presidents we've ever had. He was voted in by over, I believe, 17 million votes from the opposing party. His vice president apparently stepped down, and then someone else had to fill in that vice presidency, and that happened to be Gerald Ford. So when Nixon was ousted, when he was once the most popular president, who came into power, it was someone that no one voted for. And so Gerald Ford became president, which is a very interesting turn of events. Now there's a bunch of conspiracy around it, or some people have speculation on why Nixon was outed. I think that's beside the point for our topic of discussion. The point is, the media was so powerful, they were able to take someone who was beloved, start circulating information over and over and over again, and eventually now we remember Nixon as someone that we don't like. Some guy who was, a crook. And things like that. And so we have like Hollywood depictions of Nixon. We have people that use satire, and they would, very, very often satirize Nixon in the way they talk and speak and things like that. And so sometimes what I wonder is, why is this being circulated in the news, and how should we as Christians look at things? I think we as Christians should look at things for what we know, yes, but always have this, maybe leave a little room for mistakes. Maybe we don't see the whole picture. And I think when it comes to politics, I leave a little more room than I would normally, because I don't know everything. I'm not all-knowing. I'm not omniscient. But here is what I do know, and what is being circulated now is even this past Thursday, when Biden was asked about the documents, this is, I believe he said, in his words, they were filed incorrectly. And, that means he just gave away his position.
And he brushed it off, right? He was like, there's other important things happening. Why do you guys keep on asking me this?
Well, he said a handful of documents were filed in the wrong place, unquote. That's a big deal. Why are you filing classified documents anywhere in your possession? So that, I think, is a giveaway. We now know that the Justice Department had it in November. They waited, 60 some odd days to release it to the public that it was there. And then now they're saying they're fully cooperating with the Justice Department. So questions are like, well, did the Justice Department not want those documents back? Were they in cahoots with, the Biden admin, saying that, you don't have to give it back now because it might make a big stink in the news and we have elections coming up. Who knows? We don't know. But I think this is why a lot of people have a growing distrust of the government. We see things like this and they're not transparent. We don't know exactly what's going on. And so it could be worse or not as bad as what you are thinking. But what we do know is that what we desire is not bad. And ultimately, it does point to Christ, meaning it can only be ultimately fulfilled in Jesus Christ. The government is on his shoulders. It's not on anybody's, and nor can anybody take it and be, good at it in the sense where they'll be perfect. But can we have someone that at least honors or reveres, fears God when he or she is in a position of authority? And we know for a fact that this current president does not. And when I say that, people always refer back to previous presidents. We're not talking about previous presidents. When we had the previous president, we would talk about the previous president during his tenure. But we're talking about this current president. Does this current president fear the Lord? And I think absolutely not. And I think that all does stem from his view on life, protection of life, on his view of how he handles money, on how he handles contributions. I mean, it's not conspiracy, and it's known fact that, the think tank in UPenn, the Biden Penn Center, has donations of in excess of $50 million from China.
Yeah,
that's a big deal.
China,
Why is China giving donations to a think tank which apparently held classified documentation?
Yep.
And then, we saw that documents were in his garage with his Corvette. And he said, it was in a locked garage. And then we see pictures kind of surface from his garage during that time when it was sensitive, like in 2018-19, where Hunter Biden drove his Corvette around. So to get into that quote unquote locked garage, Hunter Biden actually had access. And who was with Hunter Biden? A bunch of people, according to these pictures. Again, I would always say, why did these pictures surface now, right? Why didn't they surface before? Are people making moves to oust Biden before his time?
Yeah.
Biden is not historically, one of the more popular presidents. However, his popularity was on the increase, and now because of this, his popularity is on the decrease. So, you get to look at polls, you get to look at numbers, you get to look at responses, not just from the conservatives, but from the liberal parties. And you get to see this continual media spin on this matter is, for me, it's fascinating. I've said this before in the podcast. I like listening and following the news and politics in our country. Our country, I believe, has politicians that are corrupt. However, I think it's probably the least corrupt. So I was joking with the speaker, Timothy Brindle, last week about, we can be, feel disenfranchised about the politics here in the States. But let me tell you about Korea. There's a saying that Koreans say that there's no politician that didn't end up in jail. And so people know politics is corrupt, and yet we still need these leaders. You can't be a nation without a leader. So what do we want? We want leaders that are of stable, consistent character, that means you don't have to like be their friends, but at least they'll be consistent. If they say something, they'll do it. If they promise something, you'll know they'll go out of their way to hold true to that promise. And they won't just change their minds. They won't flip-flop according to, the winds of culture. But if they say something, they'll do it. And we know for a fact that Biden does not do that. He's lied about everything, from even where he went to school, how he graduated from school, what kind of degrees he got. And then because of that, he actually was ridiculed. He was laughed off the stage, so to speak, in his presidential run in the 90s because he was such a liar. But yet, all of a sudden, 20 years later, here he is, and people are lauding him as someone great. No, he's not. I don't think there's any, this is not being, I don't think it's being political in the sense where I just don't like him because of the affiliation that he has. But I just plain old consistent lie after lie. I don't know anything about him. He keeps on saying he grew up here. He grew up in a synagogue. He grew up in a black church. He grew up in the Protestant church. Where did you grow up, man? No one knows.
Yeah.
And so we don't know. He is a pathological liar in that sense. And then people always respond back, well, this other guy's a pathological liar. That's not the point. The point is this person is. And so what do we desire? We desire ultimately Jesus Christ. And until he comes again, what should we pray for? We should pray for someone that most resembles Christ, but in what way? And I would think there are things like very bare bones basics, like does this person protect life? I think from there stems every other policy that you can expect from someone. And to be frank, as a Christian, I can never vote for someone that is for abortion, not just because of policy or like the politics around it, but it's because they don't respect the sanctity of life. Right now, Republicans have put up this very, straightforward measure of if they're born with a botched abortion, we should save the life, and people are going nuts. So the question is, up to what point should we kill this child? Is it 2 weeks? Is it 6 weeks? Is it 12 weeks? Is it 13 weeks? Is it 26 weeks? Is it 36 weeks? Is it 37 weeks? When do we stop?
Yeah.
And so is there anybody who's at least going to have this basic foundational understanding of life in their, in their worldview?
Mm.
And if they don't, then how can I trust this person? Because this person doesn't value life. How can I trust that this person will make any policy that will value life ultimately? And then, because people might think, oh, abortion is just an issue. No. I think life is the issue. Will government protect life, or will government put life to death needlessly, meaninglessly, unjustly? And so abortion is an unjust murder. That's why we are saying the things that we say. There's no trial. No one's putting, evidence here and there. This person's not guilty. Like, what is a 3-week-old guilty of? And so what have we been convinced? We've been convinced, like, oh, if the baby's born, the baby's gonna have a terrible life because there's no. I seriously heard this in one interview on the streets. This woman said, "This baby, you should abort the baby because there's no guarantee, because there's no formula on the shelves."
Yeah.
That's the reason. That's the reason why they should kill.
Yeah.
That's insanity. So when we go into this place of moral insanity, where we don't even know what life is, that's a big deal. And so when leaders reflect that moral insanity, how can you, with any semblance of conscience, vote for that person? You only voted for Biden because you hated Trump. Let's just admit it. You hated Trump so much. You thought he was the devil. You thought he was Hitler. That's why you voted for him. And now if I point it out, you're like, oh, he loves Trump. And I have to keep on saying and qualifying, no, I don't. I've never said that. But what I did say was, if someone does not value the sanctity of life, you can never vote for that person.
Yeah.
Because every other policy and rule stems from my understanding of what life is. And life is bearing the image of God. You destroy that life, That's not something that I can even go next to you in. And so that's why when we say things like, oh, this is political, I don't even know what that means. What does that mean when you say something like abortion is political? It's not political, my friend. This is about life. And so when stuff like this comes up, it's like, who do we trust? Do we trust Biden for what he's saying? Is he just really stupid? Is he senile? Is he losing his marbles? I mean, the answer could be all of the above.
Yeah.
Everything that he said doesn't make any sense. He is stepping all over his own toes every time he opens his mouth. However, I think the underlying premise of him not having value of life is his ultimate downfall. And it's what ultimately says to me, you cannot side with this man in anything that he says. I don't trust you. I mean, if you go around murdering people, I don't trust you. And that's why the 10 Commandments is so important. You don't value life, I don't trust you. You have adulterous relationships all the time, I don't trust you. So those are very basic things. If you keep on robbing people, I don't trust you. You know what I mean? If you don't honor your mother and father, I don't trust you. To what degree though, right? So then you're like, oh, no one's perfect. No one can fully follow the 10 Commandments like you said. Only Jesus can. Are you looking for Jesus? Again, the answer is yes, I am looking for Jesus. But I know that I won't get Jesus. So what do we do now? We push people toward Jesus. So the leaders that we are seeking are the ones that would point to Jesus in whatever sense. And so even if they are not Christian, is this person consistent, reliable, doesn't lie, doesn't cheat? But most importantly, will this person protect life? Does he or she value life? And if they do not, whatever. I don't care if it's for immigrants. I don't care if it's for babies. Whatever life, do they value life? If they don't value life, you can't trust that person. That's it.
I have two quick questions. First, in response to that, I could see somebody saying, well, Biden values the life of the mother. That's why, it's kind of a lesser of two evils, let's say.
Yeah, I think we as Christians must do away with euphemisms. We don't call it women's reproductive health care.
Right.
Whatever that even means. It doesn't mean anything. A lot of these euphemisms have gone into nonsensical terms. When you say you value the life of a mother, you would also respond, we do too. There are no, let's say, pro-lifers out there that will pick the life of a baby over the mother if that were the case. Meaning the life of the mother is going to end physically end right now. Like the heart's going to stop beating if they have this child.
Right.
There's no one that's going to say, yeah, pick the baby over the mom. No one says that. In fact, hospitals are even cute if they don't know which one, no one directs them otherwise, they always put the mother first. Okay? So that's not their talking point. The talking point is the standard of living. And that is subjective.
Yep.
That kind of subjectiveness cannot be any kind of standard because you can't make laws around subjectivity. You can't be like, the law should be on what I feel like today. That doesn't make any sense. That's why this whole transgender movement, all these things, you can't put in laws. Like they don't know how to enforce them. They'll put in these laws. They only know how to punish, but they don't know how to enforce. The reason is because you can't put standards around subjectivity. They are opposing. So standards must be something that is normal, that's consistent, that won't change, like life. That's the first thing God tells us about human life is we are made in his image. That's a standard. That's a standard by which the United States goes by. And because we went by the standard, that's why we were so prosperous, in my personal opinion, because we went by what is true, what is good. We went by what is rightly ordered, and we continue on that. You continue to reject that. You continue to reject from the 10 Commandments now all the way to the sanctity of life is why we have this insanity. And I hope people realize that. And so when we are voting, we don't vote for because we hate the other opposition. We go, who's going to protect life? And then who's going to allow us to worship? Who's going to allow us to do all these things? That's what we should be asking. And, Biden is not the case. It's it's 100% not the case. I don't think there's any doubt on even the left that Biden is not for these things that I've mentioned, where I talked about life and religious freedom. He is not for it. Even people in his own party understand that. And so we should also understand they are not for it, but we are. And so that, the way we exercise our vote, the way we exercise how we even discuss politics should be grounded on that foundational stuff. And yeah, don't give into the euphemisms. I think euphemisms need to be corrected. And we need to maybe even explore or ask people to explore, why did you have to put a euphemistic word or a term here for what is actually going on? Why do you call it abortion or women's reproductive health when it's literally the killing of an unborn child, and in some cases, the killing of a born child? Why don't we call it for what it is?
Yeah. I also wanted to just kind of mention this too, and I know you mentioned this before, but we are not a Republican podcast. We're not a conservative podcast. We're not a right-wing podcast, but we are hopefully a biblical podcast, a Bible-believing Christian podcast. And it's kind of like what you were saying. Anyone who is against what the Bible says is true and good, we have to talk about it and we have to expose it. And we have to make sure that the people listening, our church members, are aware. And that's why we do talk about these different issues and character flaws that we see. I'm not saying that anyone will ever be perfect besides Christ, but we need to, like you said, push people to be more like Christ, to pray for them to be so. And so I think praying for our leaders, I guess, is another reaction that we should be having reading stories like this.
Why do you learn theology? Do you learn theology? Do you listen to this podcast to learn about the 5 solas or the Reformed doctrines so you can just feel good inside? Or is it really because you want to exercise them in the private and public spheres of your life?
Right.
And the answer is the latter, obviously. And so how do you exercise what is good, what is true publicly? You speak on the truth. We are not political because we take a secular political party side.
Right.
What we are is we speak to politics because the Bible speaks to politics, because the Bible is speaking about truth. And so when the Bible, talks about life, we talk about life. And if there's any political party that says, no, life is not sacred in the sense where I'm going to distinguish between people who are, born and not born yet.
Yeah.
And then we could kill the ones that are unborn. And eventually it progresses to, well, if I didn't want it to be born and it was born, I should still be able to kill it. What about then now on the other flip side where we have Canadians getting robocalls if they're if they have a chronic condition that may take, that might be somewhat of a burden on their universal healthcare taxes and things like that. They're getting robocalls saying that they have a program called MAID where you can get assisted suicide. They're literally calling you to kill yourself.
Right.
Because they don't want to pay for your medical bills.
It's pretty rough.
What about that? Where's the value in life? And so it extends to all spheres of life. You never stop with the rebellion against God's laws. At one point, people just don't. It never stops with, you know what? I like the 10 Commandments except number 6. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go around murdering people. It never stops there. You murder people, then all these other commandments start to fall too. And that's why Jesus said, you're guilty of one, you're guilty of all. Because it doesn't stop with one. When you're guilty of one, you're guilty of all. And so knowing that, if you understand that, you understand the state that you're in need of a savior, you're in need of a helper. You need someone to give you strength. You need someone to correct your course. But first, to even understand that, you need to know that if you start seeing these things, like the things that I'm saying starts to make sense to you, then know that it's God who is brought you back from death to life. So that's why you understand what is good and what is true.
Yeah.
Now that God has brought you from death to life, He's the one that's going to strengthen you so that you can complete these tasks that are good, so that the things that you do are no longer corrupt, but they are noble. They're no longer detracting, but they're edifying. And so that's what we want to be, a people like that. And so the church needs to be there, and it needs to be speaking truth out there It needs to shine the light of Christ. It needs to glorify God in all that they do. Speaking out on politics, I think it's just one. It's a gem of a dimension, but it is just one dimension that Christians ought to do more often. I don't think Christians do it enough anymore because we have been bamboozled into thinking that we should keep politics out of religion. Who told us that? No one told us that. And then people keep on bringing up Thomas Jefferson's essay on how the state needs to be separated from the church. That has nothing to do with keeping religion out of politics.
Yeah.
That makes absolutely no sense. Every single statesman was religious during the founding fathers' age. What did they not talk about their religious beliefs, about where it all stemmed from? Of course not. Of course not. Even in the Declaration, even in our Constitution, there's mentions of God and the commandments. And so that's just a ridiculous notion that people are just spewing because they don't know history, but they want to conform history into their current understanding. So it is unfortunate that Christians have given into euphemisms, and number two, Christians are not speaking out it because they don't think it's their place to speak on political issues if they're informed by religious truth.
Yeah.
And that's why this hockey player, he got his jersey sold out, right?
Yeah. That was pretty great.
Yeah. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, Ivan Provorov and what he did this past week in not skating in the Pride uniform with the rainbow colored, I guess, rainbow stick, rather. Yeah, jersey sold out. There's been a controversy and that was interesting, but I actually didn't bring that up because the next point that we're going to be talking about is fairly large as well. But before we move on to that, whenever we do these current events, I always like listening to other podcasts, especially Christian ones, just to kind of see their view on things and how they interpret things. And Al Mohler, in his daily podcast, The Briefing, pointed out something very interesting, that from a Christian worldview perspective, there's a huge issue, and it has to do with the morality of knowledge and the valuable nature of information. And so he's, of course, talking about the security breach with the confidential documents. And he says, when you have information, it can be used for good or it can be used for ill. And this is the result of human sin. So I thought about that for a little bit. And I thought, how do we discern what to do with information? And let's bring it to the context of the church. A brother or a sister confesses a sin to you. What do you do with that information? Small group confidentiality. To what point do we keep that?
If you type it in as classified and you put it in a folder and you keep it in your garage with your Corvette, and your son is driving around with that classified information at his he has access to very easily, which other people obviously did. In the very least, you would think that this person does not care about your whatever was classified.
Right.
In the very least.
Mm-hmm.
And at worst, you are a traitor. And so that's what I would think. The reason why information, I'm always think is good. I appreciate that you said it, but in the very least, you would think that if someone has given you or entrusted you with information and you disagree that this information should be kept under lock and key, then you should at least approach the person saying, I disagree. And then you'll face repercussions on what you do after.
Yeah.
But if you take that information and then you are negligent with the information, then you are guilty of using that information incorrectly, no matter what, even if the classified document or whatever information that you got was like a recipe for apple pie. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
The point is, it was classified. You had no right to declassify it. You're not the president, right? He was the vice president.
Yep.
You had no power to declassify it. You didn't inform anybody that you were taking it to a place where it should not be, right? Under lock and key in the garage is not where classified documents should be. So it's like you taking a brother's information and then telling it to somebody. It's exactly the same thing, honestly. And so, if we were to kind of scrutinize this particular action, which I kind of avoided doing because I wanted to talk about the broad point.
Right.
I think Al Mohler does a good job, but then I would add to what you said that this is traitorous, and this is like, even if nothing happened, it's still a treacherous act.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can't put it in public view when you actually had no right to hold that information. Now, if he had every right to take it to his house, then people in the archives would have known because it would have been checked out and things like that. I believe that all of these things are not known to us or not being shared. I'm not sure at all
Yeah.
about how this process is going to go. But, it is one of those things where I don't trust him. I don't trust that he wasn't nefarious with these documents because of, the nature of just his character. The dude ran 3 times on lies. He failed 3 times. And all of a sudden, in the 4th time, nothing comes back up. And all of a sudden, he's voted in as so popular. That's so weird to me. But that's a political side. But barring that side, I would think that anytime you are dealing with what is, I guess, key and what is top secret, meaning integral to the security of the United States of America, shouldn't you be held to account?
Yeah. Absolutely. But I guess bringing this type of scenario, although it's not a one-to-one correlation, to a local level, I think, again, people might have questions about, okay, then at a local level, how do we handle information? Confession of sin, how do we handle that? Small group confidentiality, how do we handle that? If someone tells you a secret that they don't feel comfortable sharing with another person, how do you handle that? How do you handle that in the church?
Yeah.
I think we could even move on to like gossiping. A brother or sister tells you what you may think is gossip or a rumor. What do you do with that information? How do you squash rumors? How do we handle information in the church?
I think a good kind of place to start is trying to see how you would handle it in the family. Let's say siblings come up and they find this piece of information that they know they shouldn't have on their own. You would expect them to turn it into their parents.
Yeah.
The same in the church. There are people that have been called and ordained to handle this kind of heavy weight in the church, and that those are the elders. So if you come across information that's heavy, you would direct it to the elders. The elders would then take that information and you would trust them with it. They might not always do what is right. In fact, a lot of times I do believe elders make mistakes, but just like parents make mistakes. But what would be worse is if the kids just kept the information to themselves because they didn't trust the parents. Then that family cannot survive. That structure is already breaking down. And so there are ways to handle that information. Especially if it's sin, if someone tells you about their sin and it's a grievous sin, then you would definitely inform the elders. You wouldn't keep it to yourselves. This is what I tell like people that I'm counseling as well. If this is a grievous crime, I'm not going to keep it between you and me. If you are intent on murdering someone or taking a life, I have to inform the authorities. And then people get surprised. Oh, I thought this was just a you and me session. I can say whatever you want. No. There's no such thing like that. You confess to me that you're about to commit premeditated murder. I'm not just going to be like, oh, this is between you and me, so I can't say that. That's ridiculous.
Right.
And the fact that, we have systems in place that may even protect that is also ridiculous. And so there are, levels of discernment. There are, barriers and lines that we draw. And I don't believe it's arbitrary. I believe it's for the good of the institution or society in general, but especially the family. You have barriers and lines in your family. Draw them well. If you're part of a local church, I hope that you know what those lines are. In our church, when there's anything remotely heavy, I think our people are trained to say, I think you should share this with the elder, otherwise I will. And I think that's a good thing to say.
And I think that is the loving thing to say. I mean, for me, since I was a child, I was trained I know snitch, but really this is not, it's not snitching. It's sharing information that you think and really believe in your discernment and wisdom that is important for the elders to know to make the wise call. But let me ask you this then. Is the answer always going to the elders? Because someone that's listening to this could be thinking like, well, that's kind of seems top heavy in the sense of like all this information is being fed to the headquarters, to the elders, and they do whatever they would like to with this information. It seems kind of controlling. How would you respond to someone that may think like that?
I think I would agree. It really is about the elders not knowing every single minutia of detail, but it is about the elders need to know generally, in the very least, if someone's having a problem, we should pray for them. But for example, let's say a woman in our church. Let's call her Samantha.
Please don't. I knew you were going to use me in some way, shape, or form.
Are you Samantha?
No, what about like Junsuk?
Junsuk. Anyway, yeah. So let's say there's a woman in our church and they are having, in particular, physical woman issues, and they go reach out to an older woman to help them out through the season in life. Should the elders know about every single detail? I don't think so. I think the elders should know in the sense where they can pray for the sister who's going through a season in her life, that she can either tell the elders herself, or she would trust that the person that is mentoring her through this season will share the appropriate information with the elders. Oh, the sister is going through a tough time. Can you at least pray for her? It's physical. And then the elders will be like, oh, okay, I got it. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
And if they need to know more, they'll ask for more. If they don't need to know more, they won't ask for more. There needs to be some level of discernment, though. So I do not think the elders need to know every single minutia and detail of every single event that's going on. And I know some people desperately want to know that if there are leaders in the church, and I would discourage you from thinking you need to know every detail of what's going on in the church for you to be a capable leader.
Yeah.
But what you do need to know is you need to know where the flow is going, in the very least. Do you know the flow is going anywhere? And then how can you know the flow if you don't know any of the ripples? You don't know any of, the waves that are happening. You don't know any detail. That's problematic. So you can't just assume the flow is going somewhere. You have to know certain details. And so when the leaders direct, even though they wouldn't have every single bit of information, they do have some information, or enough information, maybe is better for me to put it that way.
And maybe this is kind of a funny connection, but so the way that we handle quote unquote classified information, meaning information that someone tells you privately, one-to-one, if it is for their benefit and for the benefit of the community, you would share it with the elders.
Oh yeah. I mean, there are times where elders know, and the party knows, and no one in the church knows. There are times like that.
Yeah.
It's not that often, but there are times like that. If they're in, let's say, this person is in deep sexual sin of some kind of immorality, I don't think the whole church should know. But I do think the elders should know to pray for that person, because if this person is in sin, they must be disciplined. But I don't think it's the elder's job then to go out there in public and say, Sam is under discipline because he's under sexual sin. That's weird, right?
It is weird, but yeah, again,
just then as an example,
another name like Fred, Paul, and I want to just kind of point out here too that the elders aren't some like rumor hungry people that are trying to get into every crevice of every single bit of information that they could possibly find. It's not like that at all, where they're like hungry for information and tea, as they say. Did you know that? Spill the tea is a Gen Z term for share your secret with me.
I don't think that's a Gen Z thing.
Oh, what is it? Is it millennial?
No, it's just the thing.
Just the thing.
You knew spill the tea?
Yeah.
Does everyone know this?
I think so.
Well, I mean, yeah. So I would say, in addition to all of that, I think we're focused on the information.
Right.
There is a purpose. And that, again, the flow to understand is so that you can lead, so that you can teach. An elder's job is to teach.
Yeah.
What are you teaching? How are you teaching doctrine? How are you training people in righteousness? Those are things that the elder should be asking. And you, as a non elder, then should be asking yourself, how can I best help this elder to lead and teach me, right?
Yeah.
You can pray for them. You can share with them pertinent information. Again, too much information is not a good thing either. You don't share with the elder what you ate for breakfast and be like, oh, but that's pertinent to my salvation because what if I ate something unhealthy? That's just ridiculous, please. They don't need to know that stuff, but they do need to know certain aspects of your life to lead you well. And so what are they? And so I do believe there's a spectrum of people's understanding, which I get. There's a lot of leeway in this sense, but it can't be nothing and it can't be everything is my point.
I had sweet potatoes for breakfast yesterday, but I won't text that to you anymore. Going along this, I guess, theme of information, I wanted to ask you one more question regarding information and information in the local church as well. That could be confidential. A brother or sister tells you what you may think is a gossip or a rumor. What do you do? What does the Bible tell us about rumors? How can we squash rumors? And, to be honest, oftentimes rumors are disguised as, I think we need to pray for so-and-so. Have you heard what he or she did?
Yeah, I think in our context and culture, we are maybe 99.9% terrible at this.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've heard one person respond in a certain manner and I was blown away. When someone starts to tell them about a rumor or gossip, they stop them in the middle and say, brother, you shouldn't be telling me about this. That's it. Or sister, you shouldn't be telling me about this. And they just stop. Because the way that we tell information or gossip or rumor is we weave it in through conversation.
Yeah.
And so, before you know it, you already know this, bit of gossip, which the Bible says goes down to the innermost parts. It's like the most yummiest morsel of a brownie that you just ingested and you love it. You love the taste in your mouth.
Yeah.
That's what gossip is like.
Yeah.
Whether it's true or false, it doesn't matter. You just love it.
Yeah.
And so to fight that is something that we need to train ourselves in. So you can either train yourself into being good gossipers, or you can train yourselves into being anti-gossipers. And I would say be the latter. Don't talk about other people. And if it's relevant to their spiritual life, you should talk to the person themselves, and you should talk to the parties involved, perhaps. But parties involved, I kind of mean elders, because they will be in charge of discipline, right?
Yeah.
And so this is what I enjoy about the Presbyterian tradition. There are go-tos. We're not Congregationalists in the sense where we vote on everything and then we have to air the dirty laundry out there. Or a wise Baptist congregation wouldn't do that. I hope not. And so even in a Baptist congregation or a Congregationalist church, you still wouldn't have the congregation knowing every detail, right?
Yeah.
So that would be the ideal.
I mean, Proverbs chapter 16, verse 28 reads, a dishonest man spreads strife and a whisperer separates close friends. Again, like you said, we are to be rumor, what is it, squashers? What is it? Rumor, not mongerers, rumor destroyers.
No.
Rumor resistant.
So how do we do that though? And you brought up, just stopping a brother or sister in their track as they're telling you this, but how can we as a church be better at doing this? Because I feel like in any setting, really, in a group of people that are sinners, this will always be an issue. This will always be a problem. So how do we improve in doing that and not gossiping or rumor mongering?
Yeah, don't practice it. That's it. I think we practice it a lot. So when you're with friends, you talk about other people,
right?
Naturally. It's this thing where in our culture, it's a weird thing that we have. I'm not sure everybody listening can relate, but in our culture, whenever we go to a restaurant, we talk about other foods.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So if you go to, let's say, a Chinese restaurant, you start talking about Japanese food or Mexican or Italian food. When you go to a different kind of restaurant, you start talking about other restaurants. It's a weird thing.
Yeah.
In a similar fashion, when friends gather together, they could talk about other people, which is weird. Don't talk about other people. Just talk about yourselves. and talk about how you can kind of stir one another up to love and good works. Otherwise, keep other people's names out of your mouths.
Yeah. Like Will Smith once said, keep my wife. Moving on, the last story that I wanted to just kind of talk about today is merit-based awards. Pastor Eugene, do you remember your SAT scores?
Yes.
You do?
Yeah.
Were they cool or were they not cool?
They were good enough.
Oh, I don't know. That's very mysterious. I don't even know what that means. She's like, do you remember your SAT scores? Don't share them, please.
It was enough for me to go to the school that I went to.
Very nice. I was more of an ACT type of guy. Yep. Anyway.
Wait, why didn't you want me to share my SAT score?
No, just in case. I don't want you to, give away confidential information.
This was 2,400.
His was out of 2,400. It was not 2,400 though.
That's true. Yes.
Yeah. I don't want to spread rumors.
It was at least halfway there, the 2,400.
Dude, if you put your name, that's like 400. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah, I can tell you for a fact that my SAT scores were nowhere near 2,400.
It was out of 1,600. Yeah.
That's actually true. I think it's back down to 1,600 now.
Yeah. I heard the writing section is...
It's completely optional.
Yeah.
Yeah. Weird. Anyway, I bring that up because our next current event has to do with rewards regarding the PSAT that were withheld or rather delayed because the school felt bad for others that didn't earn them. In Fairfax County, Virginia, multiple schools withheld academic awards from students committing to equity instead of achievements. So scores and their respective national merit awards were withheld from Thomas Jefferson High School students until after important deadlines for college scholarships and admissions had passed. So students that scored well and were actually rewarded this award were not notified until after they had submitted their college applications, so that the student and the colleges that they applied to would not be aware of such an achievement. Of course, this affects their admission and scholarship opportunities for students that have worked so hard and deserve it, all for the sake of quote unquote equity. The director of student services of one of these schools told a mother on the phone call, "We want to recognize students for who they are as individuals, not focus on their achievements." And also that the school didn't want to hurt the feelings of those who didn't achieve so highly. So now the talented, the gifted, the hardworking are being punished because others didn't achieve as highly or score as highly as they did. And the schools in this county are not new to controversy, as they have also moved from entrance exams for admission to their magnet school to a merit lottery because of a criticism that too many Asian students were scoring highly on the entrance exams. And some of these schools have removed grades D and below, so you can only get A, Bs, or Cs. I would have gone to Harvard if I went here. So it's a war on merit for the sake of equal outcome. And I think this brings into the forefront the conversation about participation awards. I know people have been talking about it for a long time. It's not about winning or losing anymore because it's too harsh. It's perhaps a reaction to the toxic environment that winning or losing causes, but it's just about everyone receiving the same credit, the same reward, and the same outcome, as long as you had fun, right? And to be honest with you, I think on the outset, this may even seem Christian in the sense that you have fellowship. You don't win, you don't lose. It's all about fellowship and having fun. We use that kind of language, and I'm not sure if that language is even correct because you can have fellowship with competition, with winners and losers. It's not mutually exclusive, but we use this type of lingo. But is this really Christian, right? Because the whole thing is, if you don't have winners and losers, if you don't get too competitive, no one feels bad, and you just love one another and enjoy the experience. But is that really Christian? Our participation trophies and lack of merit and winning ultimately a Christian moral?
This is an interesting topic because I think it's a bigger topic than you might think, or I'm talking about the listener, but as the average person, rather. It's an interesting topic because the question I think people are going to ask is, are we in a meritocracy right now? And I think we'll have varying degrees of answers if we ask just that one simple question. Are we currently in a meritocracy? And so to have meritocratic values and a system in place, do we have it to the absolute degree? No. Is it completely absent? No. Should it be either absolutely there or, completely absent? I think that is a debate that people have. We have a generation that's grown up with participation trophies, and look at them now. They're in Harvard and Princeton writing about how there shouldn't be any meritocratic value systems put in place. And, it's amazing that these institutions that are based on meritocracy are producing students that are against that value system themselves. Like, how do you judge what is good and bad? I had one interesting debate when I was in seminary, and I think I shared this with you personally, but it was a debate that the professor decided to choose so that we would debate one another, and he would choose the topic, and we would just have to pick what he not pick, but it would be chosen for us, and we would just have to debate it. And so I was chosen to side with we should give children grades. And the opposing party, she was chosen to, debate we should get rid of grades altogether. And so, there was a debate. And I said my points, and she said her points. And in the end, it was pretty clear to me and the class after the debate happened that without any system in place, without any standard put in place, you can't have education. Education will not be present. If there is no standard by which anything is judged, how do you do anything? And so by them getting rid of D's and F's, okay, so the C is an F. It's like, no. We would just give the people that we would have given D's and F's C's. Oh, so then you're lying. You're lying saying that these people really deserve D's and F's, but you're going to give them C's because they really deserve D's and F's. And I was like, no, they really didn't deserve D's and F's. According to what standard?
Yeah.
So according to the standard that is currently in place, they deserve D's and F's. But according to your standard, they don't deserve D's and F's because, for whatever reason, it's not equitable enough. They started out too low on the rung of the ladder. So you came up with that standard. That's still a standard. That's my point. You have a standard. You have meritocracy to a degree. And I know people can debate me on that aspect. They're like, no. What we really want is like, valuing passions and igniting people's creativities, things like that. That's what we really want. We don't want the intellectuals would call a paradox of meritocracy because there's inequality that happens, yada, yada, yada. And you can do your research on that, I suppose, if you want to know more. But as an ideology, people just want to reject meritocracy. You know me, I am not in that camp at all. If I had to argue against it, I probably would to the best of my ability. But if I had to personally put a stake in something, it would be into continuing to adopt meritocratic values in a system, but those values will be based on good norms, not terrible or arbitrary norms. So how do you get an A? How do you get a B? How do you get a C?
Yeah.
This is why the SATs were so fundamental to people getting into higher education institutions, because then even if you disagreed with, let's say, the SAT, from where you could disagree. You don't just fundamentally disagree on math. That's not a thing. And people now think that they do, but it's not. I assure you. You disagree with some of the things that math does, but by their scores, you can tell whether they can understand the concepts that were given. You can always fight those concepts at a later time. And this is why people like Ayanna Pressley, who is a congresswoman, would tweet things like an IQ is a measure of whiteness. So we don't know what's the measure then. What is the measure? And so is blackness the measure of good? And that's what you have to go with. If whiteness is the measure of evil, So then blackness is the measure of good. No, we don't have any measure at all. But that's not true. You have measures. People talk about measures all the time. When you go, whiteness is evil, white people are evil, you are giving a standard. You're giving a measure. Where does that measure or standard come from is what my question would be. It's not a question of do you have standards? It's where does your standard come from? And why do you hold on to these standards like whiteness is evil or whatever it is, or the SATs are bad, we should get rid of it, or we should get rid of meritocracy? Where do you get your standards from? Because you do have a standard. And if it's arbitrary in the sense, what we mean by that is by your current whims and feelings, in your current season of understanding, well, that's not consistent. We can't rely on your current understanding because it will change. There needs to be, and this goes back to what I said previously about the politician. They need to hold on to a standard, right? The closer they are to the standard, that's great. No one's perfect, but the closer they hold on to the standard, the better it is. We can trust them more. But if they don't hold on to any standard, that's rough because we don't know where your standards are. We can't trust you because one day you'll say, I am not gonna, I am against fracking. And the next day you're going to say, I am for fracking. I'm not going to get rid of fracking. And then the next day you get rid of fracking, which is exactly what Joe Biden did. And so who do we believe? Who are we to trust? What are we to trust when you say things like that? It's lunacy to think that this person will be consistent when they haven't been consistent their whole lives. So in the end, I am not surprised by people who do not hold on to a standard when they have no standard. I'm not surprised when liars lie. That's the point. I'm surprised that people are surprised that liars lie. That's weird to me. But in the sense where we're talking about meritocracy, then what standard? If you get rid of D's and F's, my point is you have a D and F. You just don't want to say that they have a D and F. You're giving them a C. So you're creating a standard which is more arbitrary than the DF standard that was there before. So we're going into even deeper lunacy in our school education systems. And so who gets to go into Harvard? If you don't know who has the actual D's and F's, who gets to go into Harvard? There's a standard. Guess what it is? It's not you, bro. Asian males are not getting into Harvard. That's a fact.
Yeah.
And so that's the standard. You can't be Asian male. Asian female, a lot are still being accepted. Some are being turned down. But, Asian male, no. And so you are making the standard about skin color because skin color apparently equates with, let's say, whatever rung of the ladder you are in. So in the end, like we said before, this intersectionality is more racist than ever. We have become more racist than we ever were by continuing to adhere to intersectional standards.
Just for our listeners, fracking is not a bad word, but it's a process by which you extract gas. No, I'm just wondering because you kept on saying fracking, so I wasn't sure if people understood that fracking.
Did you know what fracking was before I said it?
It's on Google right now, but I knew it had to do something with extracting oil, but it's a process by which it says it's a stimulation technique involving the fracturing of bedrock formations by a pressurized liquid. So that's what fracking is. Just as a side note. Yeah.
I have a question. So in the scriptures, we see a parable that Jesus tells about the laborers in the vineyard where the master would give them the same wage depending on, regardless of when they started working. So I think some people in reading that passage might be confused to say something like, isn't this going against meritocracy? So how would you respond to something like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a great example that you bring up. So some people bring up this passage where he gave all the laborers in the vineyard, the master gave them the exact same wage because this is what he had agreed to do.
Right.
So there it is. There was an agreement. There's a contract. That's a meritocratic value system because you're saying, I'm going to do this for this amount of work. There's negotiations that took place that was accepted and work that has been completed. That's what it is. In the end, Jesus didn't say, I'll give you money for the amount of work that you do. No, that's not it. But what if he had said it? Then that would be the standard that would be put in place. And people think that this is going to be the standard for heaven, that we're all going to be wearing the exact same clothes, sitting in the exact same chair, living in the exact same looking house. No, that is not heaven. That's some weirdo communist,
That's China.
that's dystopia.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's like a communist, euphoria. I don't know. That's what they think is paradise. It's not true. That's not what heaven's going to be like. Even if you look at 1 Corinthians, it talks about how whatever is going to be burned up gets burned up, and whatever will last. And those things that last, those are the things that you will be credited for in heaven. So what is it talking about there? Is it talking about salvation? No. What about what Jesus' parable was? It was talking about salvation? Yes. And so when it comes to salvation, it's not about the merit. It's about what the master agrees to give you. The master agrees to give you salvation. It's because God has saved us that we have been saved. Now, there will be rewards in heaven. There will be levels of heaven, just like there will be punishments in hell, and there will be levels in hell. We don't know exactly what those will be. We just know that there will be. Not everybody's going to be just the same. Otherwise, it wouldn't be a fair judgment, right? Not everyone's going to be rewarded the same, because otherwise it wouldn't be a fair rewarding system. And so we know in his perfect righteous judgment and his rule, we will get what we deserve as far as merit is concerned when it comes to, let's say, the tasks that are ahead of us. We see some of that here in this world. The better we reflect it, the more successful and prosperous a nation is. The worse we reflect that truth, the more dystopian it gets, aka China, And so the more you go away from norms and standards that are set by the word, the more you will see that there will be a disconnect between you and the truth, between you and godly order. And you will see that nation not stand. It just won't stand. And so the more what we want to do is we want to adhere to God's word, understand it correctly, and not put things out of context or understand it incorrectly, because that would be detrimental to our faith.
Then would you say that as a system of merit, when it's administered with honesty and integrity, is a God-honoring system?
It depends. It's just a system. We want it to be God-honoring. We know that some systems are impossible to be God-honoring, but some systems can be God-honoring. Just like if you have a church building in, let's say, Teaneck, New Jersey, is that God-honoring? It depends.
Right.
It can be. It can be, but it doesn't necessarily mean. However, if we say, if you have, let's say you're holding a church service, but it's in, I don't know, let's take an extreme example. It's in a place where they do rituals for satanic stuff. Can it be God-honoring? The answer is no.
Yeah.
It's impossible to do that.
Yeah.
You don't go to, a Satanistic like attic or, basement, cellar, whatever it is, and then think that you're going to honor God in that way. It just doesn't work that way. And so we don't want to think that just because we do something, we're set, right? We want to continue to adhere to, the norms set forth by the Bible.
I mean, I know we're talking about merit. So, what do you think I should be rewarded with?
I think what God has given you, just like the laborer in the vineyard, is a day's wage, so that you could get your food, you could get, the supplies needed for the day.
What about some Jordans?
That whatever he gives you is just, and that you should be thankful.
Is a PlayStation 5 within my merit range?
Whether you are in a meritocracy or in a communist system, just like the laborers in the vineyard, there are two types of people that we ought to look out for in the lesson of the story. Is one type of person complained and one type of person was thankful. Whatever you receive, your lot in life, are you thankful? And if you're not thankful, I think that is fundamentally your error. You need to correct that first before worrying about how much you get paid. How much did you get paid? are you thankful for that? Whatever God gave you is just. And it could be the same as the other dude, less than the other dude, more than the other dude. I don't know. But are you thankful for that? And if you're thankful, great. I think with that thankfulness, you can make things grow. Not to intertwine parables, but you can make 2 into 4, 5 into 10.
Yeah.
But you definitely wouldn't bury it if you're thankful. An ungrateful heart buries it because all they think about is punishment instead of gratitude. And so that's not how we want to function. And so whether you get a PlayStation 5 or not, will you do it with a clean conscience, without anxiety, with a thankful heart? And if the answer is no, then I don't think you should get a PlayStation 5. I think you should get a PlayStation 5 if you can hold to those convictions that you already know.
I hope you took notes, Junsuk. And, I think, speaking of merit and Thanksgiving, I think a good way to end it is that as Christians, we are to give thanks, especially as we are saved on the merit of Christ and not on our own merit, because we'd be going to hell.
I think it's a good point, actually, that Junsuk brought up, because now that I think about it, the communists that always bring up this this example of the vineyards, they're not thankful. They're not happy. So if anybody, they are talking about themselves. They're like, oh, everybody should get the same wage. Jesus said it too. But they're the ones that are complaining about the wages. So they're not happy with what the master gave them, which is very ironic, don't you think, Jansuki?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I do. We thank you for that, Pastor Gino. We thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church podcast. Join us next week as we go over and exegete popular texts that may not always be used in the correct context. John 3:16, Philippians 4:13 comes to mind. Ooh, Steph Curry, beware, and a couple others. It's going to be a nice exegetical episode. Tune in next week to find out. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight, finish the race, keep the faith. Peace. Oh, that was nice.